good time, having a good time. I'm a shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying the laws of gravity. I'm a racing car passing by like Lady Godiva. I'm gonna go, go, go. There's no stopping me.
Thank you, Stephen, for introducing me to her to start officially this conference. And I don't want to talk any more. Please, Diane, the stage is yours.
Good morning. This is really a pleasure to come and speak to you. I have to say, first of all, I notice how well dressed everybody is. This is not the usual conferences I go to where the medical docs there are usually slobs. And it's such a pleasure to see people dressed up in what I would say they're probably marrying suits or First Holy Communion suits or whatever. It looks very, very impressive. I don't usually see people who work like this. Steve Bamford actually used to report to me, and he asked me to speak, and in preparation for this, he gave me a video to watch of what was presented here last year by Elliot Forster. And I did watch it, and I know Elliot quite well, and I think Elliot did a great job of kind of giving you the lay of the land of what the industry's all about, and kind of telling where is the industry going. But I want to do something different this year and tell you, or kind of speak to you about where you can take the industry. I think the industry is in a mess, and if we don't start to change the way we do business quite substantially, I don't think the industry as we know it is going to exist, nor maybe should it. You know, sometimes evolution is a good thing. And I think in this case it is that it will be necessary if we're going to succeed. At dinner last night I was speaking with a couple of people who've been in the industry a long time, and they feel as though there's not quite the energy like there used to be, not quite the drive for innovation, nor the recognition and focus that, you know, what we're about is making medicines for people, not keeping a stock price at a certain level on Wall Street or any of the streets of finance around the world. Now, I believe that the most important, most valuable thing that a company owns is the data. The data are the crown jewels in a company's bag of information. It is critical. If you don't have that data, you do not have a drug. And I would submit to you, if they're the crown jewels, then you're the yeoman warriors. If you haven't been, for those of you who don't know, have you ever been to the Tower of London? I'm using a lot of English analogies here. I'm going to have to switch ethnic groups very shortly. But the yeoman warders are those fellows, and now a lady, who actually stand and take care of the crown jewels. And I believe that that's really what your job is to do. Now, to keep that analogy going, recognize that they don't have the crown jewels locked up in a safe where no one can ever look at them. They're on display. You get on that people mover and you move down the thing and you watch the thing, and some of us are lucky enough to get on there several times because it's so remarkable. But they don't hide it except at night. And I think that's important because as you own the crown jewels of a company, that is the data, you too should not be putting something under lock and key, but allowing people to see the data. And that's going to be the theme of what I'm going to speak about today. So I'm going to see if I don't screw up. So I'm going to tell you my personal journey. I wouldn't know a program if it bit me in the butt, to be honest with you. I've never done a program. I wouldn't even know where to start. And I will frankly admit that. That's not my shit. And you're probably wondering, why would you have somebody like me come and talk to you when the person doesn't even do programming? Well, because I'm kind of that person who, at the front end, writes the protocol and thinks about the strategy, then on the other end wants my damn data. And I'm the person who stands there and yammers like crazy, how come I can't get my data? So I'm usually the worst nightmare that you have because I'm the one who's always yammering for that data. Now, and I started in the industry in 1988, and I can remember the first time that I had done a study, and I came from academia, and I was used to hand tagging everything on a sheet of paper, and very inefficiently, and now I'm in an industry, and I have to be a little bit more attentive to the data, and I do the study, and then it went somewhere. It went somewhere into this team, and the team, I couldn't look at the data. And I went to the person who was in charge. At that time, there was no such thing as a data manager, statistician, statistical programmer. It was sort of a mishmash of one person kind of handling all kinds of stuff. I said, I'd like to look at my data. And my data, notice. And she made the comment, well, you can't because I am in charge of this data and that I'm protecting the data from you. And I said, well, what is your job? She goes, my job is to protect the data from the company. I said, you protect it so damn well that I can't even look at it to make a decision as to what the next step is in the drug development process. And that's how it went. And I found that you had to go up the line, and then my boss had to go over to their line and down the line, and finally, somehow, miracle, poof, out comes the data. It wasn't an impressive study, it was 12 subjects, but still, I couldn't get the damn data. So I started looking at this a little bit more, partly because the fact I was kind of looking, I'd always kind of look at a situation and say, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. But then also, you know, as luck would have it, I was put in charge. So all of a sudden that kind of sharpens your focus when you realize you're in charge of actually making things happen. So I then started to realize that there probably was a better way to do things, and I'm going to share with you some of those ideas now. So here's a pop quiz. Okay, it's early in the morning. Everybody, you know, was up last night probably having a drink or two, and, you know, your brain's rusty. So real quick here, I've already kind of hinted to the answer. But let's see how sharp you got here. What makes the powder in a chemistry lab into a pill in the medicine closet? Somebody yell out.
Convincing data.
Convincing data. Well, yes, that's exactly right. That is the only thing that makes that difference. Now, the chemists don't like that, and the formulators will say, you know, you can't really do anything without a formulation. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that the only thing that makes that chemical into a medicine are those data that surround that drug and make it into what it is. And I think that's important. Now, I'm going to show you, when this is going to be very painful for many of you. All right, so just, you know, get the hankies out now and start to boo-hoo, because you may not like what I want to show you here, but I want to give you the perception that many of those that are my colleagues think about that whole area of programming, data management, statistics. So Ben's my AV guy here. We practice this, but watch. Now, it's kind of funny. It does pop up later, but purely by accident, which is probably a good analogy also for how sometimes we find data in our company. You'll have to watch the last movie. I don't want to give it away. So I think that this whole area is not, the area that you're in is not sexy. People don't look as what you're doing as being sexy. They know it has to get done. But quite honestly, most folks are not taking the time to understand what you do. All they do is what I was doing, which was yammering for the data. And I think that it's part of the reason that this is the case is that those of you in this business do not take enough time to make sure that your colleagues understand what it is that you do. And moreover, how you can make the job that you do far easier by involving them in the entire process. Because somehow most people still think that what happens in the industry is that they'll dump a ton of data on this group and somehow you make miracles occur. And that programming is a little bit like, you know, we can give you any mishmash, goofy combination of things, but somehow you'll make it come out in a logical format. Sort of like a Star Trek computer, where you notice you ask the question, you always get an answer. You never get back, hey, you didn't do a standard here. Or I can't find the data. Did you put it in the right column? Or did you check the code? You never hear that. That voice is always, yes, sir, here you go with all the information. So part of the problem, the reason why you're not getting the credit that you deserve is because of the fact that you're not actually strutting your stuff and letting letting everybody know what it is that you do and the value that you bring, and more importantly, how you will change the way things are going to be in the future. Because I think, truly, that in this whole area of programming, with a little bit more sharpening, a little bit more focus, a little bit of greater application of technology, a creative process, and yes, Lean Six Sigma, which I understand is coming on the project on the docket later, you can make a huge difference. And I've already seen it, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. But do not hesitate to talk about what it is that you do. So, for example, I personally think that you need a new image. In fact, I was just reading, I forget what magazine it was, and was it one of the airlines I flew on not that long ago? Oh yeah, it was on Southwest Airlines, where I was reading the magazine, you're waiting for the flight to take off, and it was about how nurses need a new image. Nurses need a new image. And the reason they need a new image in the United States is because not enough men are going into nursing. So there needs to be a new image. Now, I don't know how you create a new image for nurses, but perhaps you guys need a new image. You need someone who's going to do a makeover on you to make it much more exciting business. Because look at what you do. You are critical of the mission of the research and development of new medicines. Safety. What does every company get in trouble for? The safety issues. There's not one company represented in this room that has not had their logo splashed across some major newspaper across the world talking about how you fudge safety. It's always you fudged it. Not that there was really an issue that was not clear, but somehow you fudged it, or the data wasn't presented. Just think of for those of you who are from Merck, the embarrassment when that one death was not reported, and the big hoo-ha that was across the papers that Merck was holding out on the information that was available. So the work that you do is absolutely critical to the safety of the drugs in human beings. Because those data that you generate and the way you generate them actually make the decisions for treatment of patients. The data actually sets the risk-benefit ratio. For all of us, there are drugs, there's a risk in every drug you take. The only thing that distinguishes a medicine from a poison is the dose at which you take it. Even water can be a toxin. But the reality is that every patient will sit down usually with their doc, figure out, is this a risk I want to take, or is it not a risk I want to take? No matter what you may think about it, that's how the patient needs to think about it. And the data you generate allow that to take place. Hypothesis generation for new indications and new development strategies is critical if we're going to milk and take advantage of every bit of information we have on the compounds that we have. Rarely does a drug do only one thing. Not to mention, as I started listening to these things, I could have kept on going on and on. Defense of the patent position, pricing strategies, authorities, legal defense, and liability cases. Effectively, everything that you do is for the bottom line of the company and the bottom line of the patient at the bedside. So don't dismiss what it is that you are doing as, I'm just a processor of one sort or another. But you got to get out of your own way and let people know the value that you create. So there's a wonderful, I would recommend, if you have not seen this article in Harvard Business Review, it's from September 2008. The title was Put Your Data to Work in the Workplace. And it talked about how companies have been sitting on tons of data which they never use. Because they don't know how to get at it. They've not organized in a way that makes it very usable. And consequently, they lose billions of dollars a year. It's a really, really interesting article. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about companies that make money off of data. Is there anybody here that does not use a computer? Raise your hand. Okay, surprisingly, no one's raising their hand. But every time you go online, and let's put it another way. How many of you shop online? Yeah, all right, pretty much. Every time you shop, there's somebody looking to see what you're buying. All right, those catalogs that may come in the mail, they don't come out of just surprise. They're very tailored often to what it is that you buy. And you'll notice that things will pop up based upon your interest. There are companies who solely do that for a living, taking advantage of the data. So if there's companies that can make money off that, how come we're not doing that internally? Let me ask you a question. Of those companies in this room, how many of you have really well done data repositories for every one of your marketed compounds? Raise your hand. Now, isn't that stupid? I mean, why would you not, if you have a product on the market, wouldn't you want to have some place where you know everything there is about that compound? Where you don't have to have somebody guess to try to figure out where something was placed? It blows my mind. And it blows my mind when senior executives, when you say to them, you know, we really should establish repositories, say, you don't have to do that. That's a thing for commercial. Like safety is a thing for commercial. Like R&D is like not part of the company, you know. It is amazing to me that not one company in this room does not have a repository for their data for a marketed drug. Look at the value that you're losing. Now, I know of one company that actually put together a single repository for a single compound. Actually, it was on Viagra. And they actually were able to mine the data from that and get an indication. They figured that the cost of the savings that they had as a result of doing that was about $10 million from actually conducting a trial. The data were obtained prospectively, legitimately for the regulatory authorities, and consequently they were allowed to get the indication. Just think about how many indications you may have within the data of your own companies. In addition, you will find that some industries very much focus on the data. I find it interesting to me that I can take my little card and go any place in any ATM machine anywhere in the world, from Singapore, China, this country, Brussels, every place I've ever traveled, and I put this little card in, and they greet me in the language, both English and whatever the local languages, and they'll give me $100 American. Now, I can't get Bamford to give me $100, and he knows me. And yet this machine will give me $100. And again, that's a large part because of the knowledge of the data that they've been able to generate. Wonderful article. I would have you recommend it. Now, I think this whole new image that you guys need is the image of a term, a completely different term. Statistical programming. Hoo-ha. Very boring. You need something else. I'm suggesting that we have to start to think about a new term to describe this whole area, and this is data curation. Data curation to me is a far more meaningful word, because first of all, most people are going to say, what? And you actually may have a chance to explain to people what it is that you do. But data curation is really the activity of managing and promoting the use of data from its point of creation to ensure that it's fit for contemporary purpose, available for discovery, and for reuse. Every bit of data that we generate in the company should fit into that mode, and very frequently it's not. I had a dinner last night with someone from Novartis, who was a colleague of mine who used to work with me for a number of years. And the individual was telling me, I said, what's it like trying to get your data? I can't, and I'm supposed to be a hypothesis generator, I can't get the data. Can't find the data. It is so difficult. And I know that I'm choosing that because it was Novartis happened to be the person, the company, but I know that to be the case throughout. We all talk about translational medicine. We all talk about how it's important, and it is critical. And more we're finding that ability to translate from the preclinical to the clinical and then back again, to understand the contingencies around certain drugs and how you can extract that information to other drugs is absolutely critical. And the whole process here, and even in this early phase, people are starting to realize that, hey, you know what? Yeah, some of these chemical structures, we can actually learn about the chemical structures and not make new chemicals unnecessarily, because we're learning from the rules of those that came before. So this whole area of translational medicine is absolutely predicated upon the ability to be able to get data and to reuse data. It is surprising to me that in this day and age that we don't look across pharmacologies. If we have it's hard enough getting data within a single pharmacology, a single molecular pharmacology. But let's say you have 6 or 7 drugs that have similar pharmacologies one to another. How often does somebody ask you the question, can we look across all 6? Can we understand whether or not there's a signal there that would help us out? How often would you look at the placebo data? Our companies go off and buy placebo data from insurance companies and everybody else, and yet we're sitting on mounds of placebo data that would tell us something about the disease that we're going into. A perfect example of that is diabetes. If you look at a class of drugs called sulfonylureas, when sulfonylureas first came on the market, drugs like diabinase and so forth, you may be familiar with them because they're pretty frequent. They're very much used. They're now generic. When they first came out, people were shocked. They said, "Oh my God, this stuff causes people to have heart attacks." Well, it turned out it wasn't that the drug was causing the heart attacks, it's that no one knew that in diabetes people die from heart disease. Now, you know, you would think this was like Middle Ages, but this was only about 20 years ago. That people did not know that. Look at a more contemporary example. Look at the whole issue about suicide in adolescents. I think Lilly, GSK, you guys have had to face that with the drugs that you have on the market. Was your drug causing suicide? And yet we started to realize, thank God for the data, but even now it's still being very much critically evaluated. Do in fact those drugs create suicide, or is it within the population? If we could mine our data from every trial we ever did, looking at adolescents and young adults and the incidence of suicide, we may have been able to answer that question far more easily than what we had to do and walk away with this, giving the impression that our drugs cause that as a side effect. The power of the data is huge. Now, I have to tell you, I think that data mining adds not only to the bottom line in terms of understanding your contemporary use for translational, understanding your drug and the toxicities that it's associated with, but in my world, I work usually in that early phase. I love that early phase of development. Everybody poo-poos it because it's the least sexy. I'm even less sexy than you guys are, because all I do is ever kill drugs for the most part, and no one likes that. The preclinical guys have, voodoo dolls with pins of that look like me, because, my job is to triage the trash from the good. And of course, nobody's bad drug is ever trash, and yet, I'm saving somebody from getting hurt. But if I could get a 10% better prediction from the animals taking a drug into a human being, I would save $100 million per drug. Because a little bit like the Jews in the desert looking for 40 days for where they're supposed to be going, I'm often looking for that dose in early phase because I don't have the preclinical data in a way that allows me to understand what, close to where I need to go in terms of the dose. A second is using, I already alluded to this, achieving improved labeling using data repositories. Shame on us that we do not have data repositories. And shame on the leadership of every big pharma and small pharma, medium pharma, that they do not have data repositories for their drugs on the market. Third is modeling and simulation. This is an area that has penetrated companies in a variable amount. Some companies are much more involved with modeling and simulation, some less. But I can tell you, I have watched as companies have run really stupid studies where if they had simulated the data, simulated the trial ahead of time from the data they have, they would have looked at it and said, there is no way we're going to beat the competition. So why even do the trial? So instead, the trial's done, they come in worse than the competition, then the whole company goes nuts. Oh my God, what are we going to do now? The 4S was an example of that type of activity. And I've seen wonderful examples by where simulating the data, getting the information, using not only the data from your drug, but also the world's literature, getting data from the literature out there wherever you can. CT.gov, whatever's been published, and comparing and then simulating your trial, you can actually decide whether or not to do your trial and what are the odds are that you're going to hit the endpoint that you wish to hit. And then two new areas. Evidence-based medicine has been around for a long period of time, but now we're getting into something called comparator-based medicine. Many governments, as a way to get around the pricing issues, are saying, you know what, we want you to show us that you're better than a cheap, inexpensive hydrochlorothiazide tablet on the market than your new drug for hypertension. And if you can't show me that you're any better, then why bother? It's sort of the antithesis of personalized medicine. But when you're sitting in a seat that worries about money, you're going to forget about personalized medicine. Personalized medicine is going to be expensive. You want cheap and dirty. And so that is going to be coming forward more and more, the whole concept of comparator base. And who's, again, going to sit on, who are you going to let do the comparator base? We do the comparators in our trials. We better have those data available to be able to defend ourselves. Otherwise, who do you think is going to, whose data they're going to go to make a decision about comparator-based evidence? Anybody want to take a guess? Insurance companies. Or the medical, the medical arms of our governments. Now, there's no bias in those groups, right? None whatsoever. Not that they would ever want to not put a drug on the market, because their data suggests that whatever drug is already there is doing a good job. So we have to be in a defensive position, because otherwise somebody else's data is going to be used. Right away, I see a conflict here. On the one hand, what traditionally I am told is that what we are supposed to do in data programming and data management and statistician is that we make tables, we make listings, and we make data for reporting. Right? Nice little, discrete little boxes of things that we do. And I'm suggesting that what needs to be done is this informative data assembly for hypothesis generation. I would like to suggest even further that we need to completely overhaul the way we do this whole system. I think the way we have set it up over the past years is it was okay at the time for a very small product line, a very limited view of what's done with that data. But if we're going to get to repositories, if we're going to be in a situation where we have to defend ourselves against evidence-based and comparator-based medicine, if we want to extract every piece of value, because in the future we're not going to have as many opportunities to get new drugs to the market, we have no choice but to have to think about new ways of doing things. Standards, yes. New technology, yes. And finally, new ways of doing the business process. And I want to discuss those one after the other. If we don't do that, I guarantee you we're going to be driven out of business. Now, this is your bread and butter, much more so. But sometimes it's kind of nice to have somebody come in who doesn't know the business quite as well and kind of look at the way things are done and ask the question, why do you do it that way? Can't it be done differently? So here's an example. Steve Bamford, he's living proof, so you can talk to him. We had set up a phase 1 unit. Now, phase 1 units, everybody say, well, that's cheating because that's a very controlled environment. Especially if you own it, you can make all this stuff happen. Yeah, but if you can't make it happen there, you can't make it anywhere. So it kind of proof of concept. And basically, it was online data captured right at the bedside. From instruments, there was no case record forms per se. Everything was directly captured, no source documents. Everything was directly captured into the database. And I looked at this, and everything was so technologically advanced, and everything was talking to everything else, and was so well related, that I asked the question, how come I can't get my damn data in 24 hours after the last patient's visit? Well, the deer in the headlight look of my entire staff was like, no way. So my answer was, way. I said, I want you to go off and figure out how to do it. The technology is all there. The thing that's stopping you is the stupid process. And because the process that was applied was a process that had been done for years, that was from a paper-based mindset. And so what we started to do was, this was the previous process. We just do the SAP and the soft lock and clean and draft tables and yada, yada, yada. And there was, God forbid that any clinician use a standard. Everybody had to have their own date of birth. It's expressed in their own a creative way. As I told the team, you want to be creative, go get a tattoo. We're going to use standards. And so we started using standards. In fact, I was a bully. I wouldn't let anybody go out of the standards. But how many different ways can you express systolic blood pressure? Really, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking that question. And so we started doing this, and we said, you know what, we're going to do more up front. And I put other caveats on them. I want this to become a consistent process. And on top of that, I don't want you to give me the same old line you always do, which is going to cost more time and more money. Same resources, less time, and better quality. Better quality, less time, same resources? What are you, you shall see the law. Am I right? They were like, this woman is nuts. What did I sign up for? Well, to make a long story short, the first time they did it, they were like, yeah, we can do it. And then as they started getting into it, by the time I decided to move on to my next challenge, they were down to actually 48 hours after the clinical data were released from the unit, research unit, where you had final tables actually delivered. And not to mention, not only were final tables delivered, but in fact, you had an ongoing database that was completely integratable, such that at any time, when I asked the question, okay, what is the rate of headache in the 3,000 subjects that we dosed to date, I could go online and see it just like that. In fact, I could see all my data whenever I felt like it. If I've been having insomnia at night, where I wanted to party all night, I go look at my data because it was all online at my fingertips all the time. Now that became de rigueur. No extra head count, and actually the quality was better. The queries, if we had one query per database, that was remarkable. Not per page, per database. And it was usually a clarification. You don't believe me? Ask Steve. So then we went to the later phase, and now we did this in this very contrived, very restricted, very disciplined environment. And now we went to our colleagues. And, we were doing studies outside, and I asked the question, look at the process. And each color is a different group. How can there be so much necessarily done? What was the purpose of all this? And what I found was that over and over again, the same things that were done on a routine basis, because let's face it, after all, there's so much in any clinical trial that is done over and over and over and over again. Why do we have to keep on testing it every time? Why can't we bake it in, get it done, and just reuse it? All right? And when you compare what this process was like and what it was like here, where the case record form took 4 hours, and that's with, even a review, which may have been too much. How is it that you can take 35 days of setting up a study and get it done in 4 hours? Standards and and right motivation, and also making sure that we reuse stuff where it was possible, and frankly, just a change in mindset, getting away from the paper mindset. Here's one. Where's Michael up there? Michael sitting behind a lady with a hair like Ben, who's going to do Lean Six Sigma. Where is he? Oh, there he is. Okay, you do have hair like Ben. All right. Michael, this one's for you. This I was told, this is from the oncology group, and as we all know, there's no bar, there's no point in oncology. Oncology's different. And if I hear that one more time, I'm going to vomit. Okay? It's always oncology's different. So, the best way to kind of change behavior is take the most outlier. Take that person who's the biggest reprobate and yank them in and make them change their behavior. That way no one else can say, we can't do it. If oncology can do it and they're different, you can do it. So we actually took a case record form, and it just happened to be an example. It has to be a case record form, but it sets the foundation for everything else downstream. And we said, okay, you don't think you could do any faster. Well, let's just measure. Let's have an outside group come in. Deloitte comes in. This is their work. They're beautiful stuff, by the way. They'll come in. They'll just kind of, as an objective observer, kind of measure what we did, all right? And, they took the case record form. This is an oncology study, not a particularly difficult oncology study. In fact, in an indication that had been done, maybe 15, 20 times already. So we're not talking like really novel case record form here, novel disease. And it took 225 days to get that case record form done. When in fact, the value added time was only 19 days. And in fact, if you really looked at the actual effort time, it was like 3 days. But it did show something here. What these little things are all the different people that were involved. And the number of times they reviewed that same case record form. And this poor slob over there, look at that. This poor individual over there was the recipient of all these changes. And what we found was that you had 3 of each discipline. And within the discipline, they couldn't agree with one another. It was unbelievable. The people today still are not talking to me. Because I accidentally one time put up what the study was. And to this day, I think they're not talking to me. But you ask the question, why does it have to be that way? when you tell me your processes are slick in your company and you're getting your data out in X number of days, does it look like this? How many handoffs do you have? How many times does you say one thing and your partner next door says something else? And this is where I think standards need to come in. Not mindless standards where you don't use your synapses when it's required, but where you can use stuff over again to make your lives easier, to reduce the timelines, to speed things up. I'm suggesting to you can't do it. And in fact, what happened is that we changed the process to this, and then I took it down even further where I wanted 7-day case record forms. These were for external studies. Internal studies were 4 hours, but external. I would have liked 4 hours on the outside, but it wasn't possible yet because of... But this is the kind of thinking. If you're going to do this, if you want to speed things up, look at this. Ladies and gentlemen, 225 days. And let me move on here. Here's actual data. This data was just presented 2 weeks ago to Clinical Data Management. And it's the power of standards. This comes from PhUSE and was presented by Anita Palmer and Roberta. I'm blocking out Roberta's last name. But you can see here is the initial events and how long it took to get something done and the constant reduction that finally took place. But you cannot just expect people to use standards and not... you have to measure the importance of coupling metrics, meaningful metrics, with standards, and changing a process is incredibly powerful. Here's another example. This is on oncology, and you can see even oncology where things are different, they're actually from 181 down to 105 days, and now we'll be down to 70 days. Still not as fast as it could be. So I make the point that you have to think about how you can use your technology. You have to think about your process. You can't just tell me all the times that it has to be that way. You've got to sit down and dissect it as the Lean Six Sigma process forces you to do through the why process and understand. And then you've got to measure relevant endpoints to see whether or not you're making a difference. And you've got to share them with everybody. But having said that, iPhone. Who's got an iPhone here? A lot of people. Blackberries? I think I was one of the first people to get a BlackBerry. I was so excited. It was like, wow, I'm getting my email. Now I'm getting things I don't even want. It's unbelievable. And not to mention, I can look at my home account. I can look at my business account. It's unbelievable what we can do with these electronic capabilities. And I asked myself, if I can do that on my BlackBerry or on the iPhone, how come we can't do it in our offices with the data? Why can't, if the data is in a nice database, why can't you just give the clinicians read-only access, but with the right tools to allow them to actually look at their data? Because what's happening is that you're often asked, oh, please, can you do this programming for me? When in fact, all they want to do is kind of fiddle around with the data. They want to get their hands in there a little bit. They want to kind of get down and get dirty. They want to ask questions, which I like to do. But you can't do it if you're asking you a question who then goes to you to program, who then comes back with an answer that really wasn't the question I asked. Or it took so long, I forgot what the question was I did want to ask. You cannot expect clinicians, and I hate to say this with rare exceptions, I'm part of the tribe, to do a I review or J review. That is, you've got to be a programmer to use that stuff. You've got to make things simple and easy. So those of you from SaaS and all these different program companies out there, you got to start to think from your customer's standpoint, not just the programmer standpoint, the customer who wants to fiddle with the data. I want an app on my iPhone. My data app. I don't know why I can't get that. Why can't we do that in the industry? Do you know that there's an insurance company in the United States now called State Farm Insurance? They have an app for your accident on your iPhone. So if you're in an accident, you go, oh, I'm sorry, here, take a picture, send it right to the company. Oh, here, we're going to fill out the forms. Here it is. Okay, boom, done. Right there at the accident scene. You don't have to wait for the cops to come. You don't have to fill out the paperwork. Everything is on your app, on your phone. And I asked the question, why can't this be done? So, like I said, I'm active into technology. I'm intuitive because I'm basically an idiot when it comes to this stuff. I'll really admit it. I need to have it intuitive, and I want to be able to play around without pushing the wrong button and have everything go defunct. I don't want to have to come to you and beg for something to be done and be told, oh, go in the queue. I don't want that, and there's no reason it has to be that way. Now, I want to tell you how you have to start to think about this. Anybody know who Journey is? They told me that in Europe they won't know who the rock group Journey is. I want to prove them wrong. Anybody know who Journey is? Oh, excellent. Okay, for those of you who do not know the words of the song, I even Googled them to print off. So if anybody would like to see them, but as you know, it starts out just a small town girl living in a lonely world. Anyhow, you'll hear this later on. But does anybody know the story behind Journey and their new lead singer? Anybody here from the Philippines? Huh? Yeah. Well, what happened, the guys had very distinctive voices. You'll hear later when we want to be very topical. But they usually, you'd have to come for auditions. You want to be the new lead singer in a rock band. You just can't, call somebody up, yes, I want to be a rock singer. You're replacing usually the front man of the entire organization. So what they did was, rather than having auditions in Los Angeles, London, and New York, as they normally would do for a band located in the U.S., what they actually did was put out on their Facebook, you were looking for a replacement for Steve Perry. He's going off and doing other stuff, but we need somebody with this kind of voice. They got thousands, tens of thousands of auditions all on YouTube from people all over the United States, and there was a guy from the Philippines who was single mom's, a kid from a single mom, lived out in the boonies, but had a computer and knew how to use YouTube, and he auditioned, and he swears to God, you can't tell the difference between him and Steve Perry. It's unbelievable. This concept of triangulation, using technology for a new purpose than what it was originally intended to. The new company that I'm working with, I'm just going to give you another example because I'm really excited by it. For those of you who work in the drug industry, you know the problem that we're having is not having enough targets. Many of the targets that we would like to go after are in the cell or in the nucleus. And most of the chemicals that we make that get absorbed by the body can't penetrate. The cytoplasm can't get in the nucleus because they're polar. You need something that's a little greasy, kind of to slide right into the membranes. Well, somebody had this, I looked at proteins. Proteins are real big. But when you get down to it, the lock and the key, that is the receptor and the agent, where they come together, is really through usually a helical interaction. A small helix, only about 10 to 15 to 20 amino acids, just a small chunk. We've got this humongous protein whose sole purpose is to take this little itty-bitty helix right to the receptor and cause that lock and key interaction to allow the events to take place. So somebody got the idea, well, why don't we just strip out that helix? Well, you can do that, but when you do that, all those little peptides become linear and the body starts to eat them up. So somebody got this idea, why not is there any place else in nature where you have helix? Well, it turns out in polymer science, polymers is all over. You're sitting on polymers here. And what they found was they took a chemical reaction from polymer chemistry, applied it to the helical structure of a biological product, and now we have something called staple peptides, where it's an itty-bitty little molecule. It has the properties of a small molecule in many ways. It's very stable, and it gets right into the cell. So opening up a whole new area of currently undruggable targets. I'm excited because this is triangulation, this concept of taking technology and opportunities that are maybe outside your area and applying them. When somebody says to me, oh, I don't know what Novartis is doing or GSK or whatever, forget it. I can care less what anybody else is doing because you know what? They're probably doing all the same stuff. I want to go to another industry, get ideas from them, and apply it to my discipline and see how it can be used. A little bit like Journey and using that technique. Now here's another horrific disease. This is terrible. This is worse than venereal disease. It really is. You should wear a big A on your chest or a big P if you ever get into this. Because everybody in this industry has this mindset, well, we have to do it that way. The FDA or the MHA or you name the regulatory authorities make us do this. No, they do not. What they want is integrity of data. You just have to demonstrate that integrity of data. But this process that we have been enjoying for so many years is killing us. And it's totally unnecessary. So do not take technology and then apply a paper-based mindset to it. All you're going to do is slow things down and make it get rid of all the efficiency you're trying to get. Now, the world is flat, is it not? I mean, we can get a singer from, Philippines to fill in for an American band. All kinds of stuff is going on. But it's kind of interesting. What we're finding now is that the global studies that are being conducted, initially, we always thought Japan was like an outlier, right? Oh, Japan, they always want to do things differently. They're like oncologists. They're different. And oh gosh, a wonderful article, not so wonderful actually, came out of the Duke group. We're looking at the ethical and scientific implications of the globalization of clinical research. And what they're finding is that, not surprisingly, depending upon where you do your studies, the subgroup analysis there is very different than it might be in the subgroup as a whole. And generally speaking, what we're finding is that when you look at studies done in the US or Western Europe, the results are different than they are in the rest of the world. So much for going to the rest of the world. And the reasons for that are not yet clear. Where's the truth? Are the data from the West correct? Are the data from the East wrong? We don't know. But what's very clear is that more and more agencies are going to be asking for this kind of thing, which means the data has to be at your fingertips. So where are the pharmaceutical companies going? I personally think they're a mess. I think in large part because the leadership has gotten away from understanding the business. And that creates opportunities for folks like you. We always think our leaders are the people that should be leading the change. But you forget it. It's got to be people like you in this room who have bright ideas, who understand the day-to-day business, who can make the changes that will completely make this business a better business than what it is right now. Do not wait for your senior leaders, the CEOs of your company. They don't even understand what's going on. Forget it. It has to be you. And I'm not being pejorative of them. I'm just telling you the reality. It's got to be you. And so these big companies are going from monoliths that encompass all services and capabilities to virtual networks of specialized service companies. More and more people are going to strip as the product capabilities low. Look how many of you have merged just in the last couple months. Wyeth, Pfizer, Schering-Plough, Merck, Genentech, together with Roche. You can't survive. And then what's going to happen the next time? You're going to have to think about doing this business different. You've got to rely upon novel process and technology. And let me mention one other thing, electronic medical records. This is coming very, very soon. It's going to be different. And already I've seen some people talk about this. These people are on the forefront, and there are issues that are going to need to be addressed. But they're already applying paper concepts to an electronic medical record. And it's driving me nuts, having gone through that in a phase 1 arena and seeing what you can do if you did it without the constraints of paper, with the same degree of integrity. If we go into a medical record data approach, then I think, please, what I would ask you is please think about it as an electronic capability. Do not apply the paper process. You'll just bog yourself down. So I ask you, quo-wise, where are you going? We're not talking about the companies, but where are you going? If you continue to operate the way you are today, I would hate to say this, but you are in fact contributing to the demise of the companies. You're contributing to the demise of this industry. Because we need, I understand that many people in this room are shakers and movers and are forward-thinking people. It is hard being a shaker and a mover. There are many people around you who kind of think you're nuts. People around you that think you're trying to, score points so that you can get promoted. There's all kinds of, and usually others who are threatened by this don't take the time to listen to you. And yet your ideas may be very, very sound and can make the difference in the company. And so I encourage you, are you going to be a passive follower that just says, oh, this is the way we've always done it? Or are you going to ask the question, where can we go? What can we do? I can tell you, it may be a little bit more painful, a road to take, but it is far more rewarding. Far more rewarding. And the industry, and more importantly, the patients, because everything you do does touch a patient, whether or not you realize it. really are relying upon these new medicines and the quality data that allows us to make decisions about how to take these medicines. So I wanted to show you what your career as a curator could be, not as the perception was previously.
Getting late. You ready to go home?
Nope.
Let's rock.
All right, you know, it's very hard to find a theme from a movie that kind of talks about data curation. I did the best I can, but I don't appreciate that. But it is about the sense of excitement, the sense of enjoyment, and the sense of interaction that can occur. So I really, you know, part of my message here is really a plea to those of you who are trying to do something different. I hate to say it, but too often, this whole area of data, folks have a very negative image of themselves. They don't feel as though they're well received in the teams, but they often are seen as second-class citizens, or they feel like second-class citizens because the clinicians or other folks seem to get all the glory, or they seem to be in sexy positions. All I'm telling you is that you've got to raise yourself, if that's your attitude, you've got to raise yourself mentally out of that. What you are doing in terms of providing the information of the company is absolutely critical. It is the most critical job that there is in handling that data, curating that data, providing that data. But the challenge that I lay down to you is thinking differently about how to do that so the data is immediately at people's fingertips and the integrity is still there. It is totally possible. I just don't think we've really thought about it as much as we can. So I would like to suggest to you don't stop believing in yourself and what you can do and be a leader. And so for those of you who do not know Journey, we'll play just a little snippet now as a way to reinforce that, and I hope you have a very enjoyable 3 days. And I'll be around all day today and be happy to talk with any of you about some of the thoughts that I have. Thank you very much.